All right, welcome to Del Baccaro and Hook Enlightened Descent. I am Steve Hook. My partner in thought crime, Tom Del Baccaro, got married last week. We congratulate him and his beautiful wife, Nicole. They're on a well-deserved and no doubt very fun honeymoon. He's been sharing pictures of Barcelona, and they're going to Italy. They're just doing the whole thing. And what a wedding it was, but congratulations to Tom and Nicole. But because Tom and Nicole are now out of state, uh, fortunately for them, enjoying a wonderful honeymoon, I've decided to hold down the fort for the next week or two. So it's good to have you with us today. We've got a big show for you today. Coming up, we're going to be speaking with Noel Fitch. Noel is the publisher of National File, and he's got some say. And by the way, he's based in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So we're definitely going to be talking with him about what's going on in Western North Carolina. We'll probably touch on Israel and Iran and the conflagration and perhaps regional and pray God not perhaps even a world war coming out of this. Although I suspect tensions will calm down. But again, Israel has not retaliated for those 187 or 100, close to 200 ballistic missiles coming their way, and they've promised they're going to retaliate. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. What kind of retaliation they're going to undertake. I suspect they're going to be going after. This is just a guess. Some of their oil refineries to kind of cut their funds a little bit. And I wouldn't be shocked at all, President Biden's stern warning notwithstanding, I would not be shocked at all if they go after a nuke facility, not with nukes, mind you, but with conventional warfare, just to slow their roll on getting a bomb. Could you imagine if those maniacs in Tehran had their hands on a deliverable nuke? That could be bad for everybody, no matter where you live. So we'll chat with Noel about that. May even chat with our own producer about that because she is an Iranian American. But a lot's been going on. Trump made his triumphant return to Butler, PA. As you may recall, Butler, PA was the location of the first assassination attempt that Trump took a bullet in the ear just by, some people say divine providence, and who am I to argue with that? Trump was just turning his head to look at a graph showing the utter incompetence, and really not even incompetence, because when you say incompetence, that suggests that you're just not good at what you're doing. But if what you're doing is intended, then maybe the southern border is not a case of incompetence so much as it's a case of we don't give a rip, and we're gonna open it wide, and we're gonna fundamentally change America. If you ever wanted to know what fundamental change looks like, we're starting to kind of get a little taste of that. But at any rate, on his big triumphant return to Butler, he brought some special guests. He brought some very special guests. Tulsi Gabbard was there, former Democrat who eviscerated Kamala in their debate. In fact, it could be stated that Tulsi Gabbard was one of the reasons that Kamala bagged out of the presidential race before the first primary, because Tulsi Gabbard just took her apart on the debate stage. Well, now she's on stage with Trump in Butler. And then you've also got Elon Musk. Elon Musk, not only is he the richest man in the world, but between Elon Musk and Trump, I would say they have done more to help the people of North Carolina and these flood ravaged zones throughout the Southeast than the federal government has. So Elon Musk is up there speaking. I want you to hear what Elon Musk had to say, because this is spot on true. Let's go. I say let's go live, but this was live in Butler, PA. Elon Musk addressing the crowd. Check this out.
The true test of someone's character is how they behave under fire. And we had one president who couldn't climb a flight of stairs, and another who was fist pumping after getting shot. Fight. Blood coming down the face.
You gotta love Elon Musk, man. I tell you, he used to be the darling of the left. He was the guy. He was the guy that was getting us off fossil fuels. He was the guy that basically invented a workable EV. That while maybe still losing money, at least Teslas are ubiquitous now. You see them everywhere. And he was their champion. And all of a sudden, he started talking about freedom of speech. And all of a sudden, he started talking about the importance of the people. And that's when the left turned on him. And now he is persona non grata to these folks. It's pretty ridiculous, really. I mean, the people that are the same party that's running around chanting that Donald Trump is a direct threat to democracy and he is an existential threat to your very way of life. Uh, Now all of a sudden he must be shut up. So it's pretty interesting to watch that. I'm very interested in how PA is going to go. From what I hear, people I know on the ground there, Scott Pressler and others are saying, "Look, man, the Republicans are registering a bucket load of people in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania." And that could come down as Pennsylvania goes, so goes the election. So it's going to be very interesting to watch that. It was great to see Trump go back there. And I love the way he started his speech. He said, I should have brought this clip, but I didn't, but you can look it up. He started it by just basically saying, and as I was saying, it's to basically pick it up where he left off. It was a wonderful event. There were lots of people at the first event where he was shot. There were almost twice as many at this event. So things are happening on the ground, and we'll continue to watch that. But it is good to see people like Elon Musk and Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. standing alongside Trump. And then you look over to the other side, and you've got Lynn Cheney, uh, and of course you've got Adam Kinzinger, and you've got George Conway, the ex-husband of Kellyanne Conway. Uh, I think we've got the stronger team, but we shall see. At the same time, we've got absolute disaster happening over in Israel. This all started on October 7th, as you well know. We don't need to go over the whole thing, but what we do need to touch on is just how involved Iran is with all of this. It's true that Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, and it's true that they carried out barbaric acts. It's also true that a whole bunch of people that call themselves Palestinians support Hamas, even to this very day. But Iran is also backing the Houthis in Yemen, which are firing rockets at our ships, at our warships, and firing rockets into Israel and firing rockets just about everywhere they please. And then you've got Hezbollah in Lebanon. So you've essentially got a forefront war here for Israel. And I wanted to bring on our producer because she's wonderful, but Annie Cyrus is also an Iranian American, and I think she has a lot to say. Annie, why don't you hop on here with me for a sec? It's so good to see you and hear you. What do you think about what's happening here? By the way, I should mention before we do, Live Up to Freedom is Annie's podcast. It's her site. It's basically her whole MO, and it's a great call. Annie, welcome to the program, first of all.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. It's good to be heard while running the show.
Yeah, exactly. It's good to have you there. You're pressing a lot of buttons, a lot more than I am. But what do you think about what's going on in Israel with the ballistic rocket barrage that came directly from Iran this time? They didn't go through the proxies, although they did use Hezbollah, but they also fired some directly from Iran. How is this going to play, do you think?
Well, you started this very perfectly. It's important to say this and this. Here's the most important thing we should say, Steve. It's important to say Hamas, Hezbollah, all of them. It is Iran. You're looking at Iran. They might have different alphabets in them, but they're all built, funded, trained, and backed by Iran. So let's quickly hit back here, America. October 28th, 2021. Biden regime decide to get back on the indirect negotiations with Iran. It started lifting sanctions. It started unfreezing frozen assets. It started saying, well, go ahead and sell your oil wherever you want to sell it. It started funding what we're looking at. Comes tomorrow, 1 year since the barbaric attack by Hamas took place. Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas have been attacking Israel and Israeli people non-stop for a year. But now, somehow, our media the mainstream media, and even some of the alternative media are just sitting there saying, well, Israel was asking for it. Israel took out Haniyeh. Israel took out Nasrallah. That's a topic for another segment. But point is, no, Biden regime, us, American tax money, funded what we're looking at in Middle East right now. And Islamic Republic of Iran will continue doing this unless, there's a big unless comes 30 days, well, 29 days from today, we make sure President Trump is back in the office, because the only person these mullahs are terrified of is President Trump.
Yeah, well, exactly right. I mean, I remember when they took out Soleimani, and Annie, you'll remember this. When Trump took out Soleimani and they identified him by his dismembered hand and his gold ring with the big ruby in it, I mean, well, that's his ring, so he's done. Iran promised retaliation. That came up to basically nothing, because there was nothing they could do, because Trump bankrupted them. He froze their assets in U.S. banks, as you touched on. He sanctioned their oil. They were basically on the balls of their ass. They had no money. And this is where it drives me nuts, Andy, because just like we've seen in the southern border, what the Biden administration did immediately upon assuming office was basically undo everything Trump did, because big, bad, evil, orange Trump was the problem. And since that time, we've got 20 million illegals. God knows how many of them are state-sponsored terrorists. We don't know. We have no concept of that, but I assume we're going to find out in the coming weeks and months. Then you've got what's going on in Ukraine. And of course, we've also got disaster relief that they can't handle. And the mullahs have a pocket full of money. Is it any wonder that these attacks from the Houthis and Hezbollah and Hamas, is it any wonder that this would happen now? How much of the blame do you lay on the Biden administration for what we're seeing now?
I would put a good 70% of blame on Biden regime for the fact that you're very correct. Iran, the mullahs in Iran were getting ready to exit. Between being broke, between being dealt with, and between Iranian people uprising after Masa Amini's death, they were getting ready to exit. They were calling their friends, asking, where can I go to hide? And within less than 4 or 5 months of Biden regime taking office, they gained enough power to become what they are today again. It's definitely, and again, I'm not going to say 100% because the mullahs have been at it for a while. The Israeli government is not necessarily doing the right thing. And I want to put a disclaimer here that I always do. Criticizing the government of Israel is not anti-Semitism. So comment section, calm down. But the government, not Netanyahu himself, but the entire government altogether, as you know, Steve, their government is very complicated. It's so many knots and twists, and it's just, you don't know who's who. But the government of Israel has to take some responsibility. The mullahs are definitely responsible. However, the majority of responsibility goes to Biden regime funding this disaster.
Yeah, that's what gets me. If money makes the world go round, and if money is the root of all evil, then giving money to evil people seems to be a pretty stupid move. It's counterintuitive. But when, we've always questioned, Annie, who's running the show on Pennsylvania Avenue? Is it this cognitively gone old man? Is it his utterly inept VP? Or is it a cabal of people behind the scenes, including Susan Rice, Valerie Jarrett, and some of these folks? I tend to believe that there's a cabal, and I don't think this is a conspiracy theory. I think it's borne out by facts on the ground. I think that there's a cabal behind the scenes that is sympathetic to the mullahs, including the aforementioned Susan Rice and Valerie Jarrett. And they were like, we'd be wise to get on the good side of the mullahs, screw the people of Iran. As a Iranian American, that must infuriate you.
That's an understatement. Yes. To answer your question of who's running the country, I have always pictured it as, let's do a quick comparison. Have you looked at UN lately? You have Saudi Arabia in charge of women's rights, right? You have Iran representing the human rights. This is exactly how I look at the cabal you're referring to. It is not one person from one country. It's a group of evil who have no problem turning this entire earth into one world order. Everybody heard of it before. It is, however, to my fellow Americans, it's very frustrating to know that people like me are out there saying, listen, this is what's happening. This is what's going on with the mullahs. And Americans, citizens of America, still don't understand the alliance, the unholy alliance of red and green being the Marxists and the Islamists. It's exactly what is going to destroy us if we don't stop it. We're literally funding our own demise, our own freedoms,
Yeah.
our own liberties. But we're so busy getting distracted and believing what's been told on Google search that we're not actually listening to those who've been there, done that, and are listening every day.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly right. And you know what? And Annie, that's on every front. Yeah, we can talk about the Iranian mullahs and the evil there, and that's self-evident. But you look at the southern border. But you look at the depletion of our own military. You look at the wokeness that has taken over the military. All of this, and I love the way you put it. We're funding our own demise. All of this is being footed by the U.S. taxpayer, and the U.S. taxpayers had about enough. I mean, you see people that are typically natural allies of Israel saying, "Okay, Israel's got enough money. Let's focus on the people in on Black Mountain in North Carolina. Let's take care of the folks in Chimney Rock, North Carolina, or Asheville." And even that's screwed up. We are just, I think people have had enough. Do you get the sense, Annie, and I'm going to talk to Noel about this as well, but do you get the sense that people are starting to wake up to this insanity that we've seen over the last 3+ years?
Oh, most certainly. Yes. A lot of people, I think a lot of Americans are finally coming to realize that this has nothing to do with left versus right, Democrats versus Republicans. All of that is fading away. A lot of people are coming to realize that we need to unite as one nation. Which, since I said that, let me follow through. One of the biggest issues I personally believe, Steve, we're facing is we're supposed to be one nation under God. Right now, we're a split nation under so many self-God projection. We
Yeah.
need to bring God back to our country. We need to bring God back to our home, to our school, to our local communities. Because one of the reasons we're suffering, I do believe in judgment. Yes,
Yeah.
God is forgiving. Yes, he gave his only son to clear out our sins. However, that doesn't mean we get to walk around and kill babies in tens of thousands and allow all sort of sinister lifestyle going on in our countries and not to be judged. So, yes, people are waking up. But again, if you would ask me, bring God back, number one. Number two, stop the division. We don't have to, I'm sure, Steve, me and you, we can find 10 things to disagree on. That doesn't mean we can't work together to solve our problems and save our country.
Yeah, I agree with you completely on all of that. You know, when you ask God to leave the town square, guess what? He listens and he's gone. And now we suffer the ramifications. And then when you say, well, maybe we should get back to faith a little more, maybe we should kind of lean in on morality a little more, then it's like, oh, don't you push that crap on me. Freedom of, freedom of religion doesn't mean you have the power to enforce your religion on me. And of course, nobody's saying that. But I do find it a little bit insufferable that we are being told by the left over and over again, don't force your religion down my throat and don't judge me on your thin view of morality, when they have no problem shoving their immorality down everybody else's throat.
And let's not
It's
mention,
unnerving.
they also have no problem lifting a 180 plus year law in Congress so Ilhan Omar could walk in with her hijab in, right? That's
Yeah.
okay to be shoved down our throats, but we can't say simple prayers on the street without being handcuffed and taken in.
It's pretty sick. It's pretty sick. And it's not just happening here. It's happening in the UK. It's happening in Australia. It's happening in Europe. And this rise of anti-Semitism is very scary, but I do think that people are starting to wake up to it. I think that these college kids and universities, they've been so filled with hate of own. I mean, they hate their own country, and they really hate Israel, and they really hate anything that doesn't toe the line of what their Marxist professors have taught us. Annie, I want to thank you for jumping on with me today, but we've got a big show, and thank you for doing such a wonderful job on Del Bacaro and Hook as you always do.
Well, I appreciate you bringing on, and let's just make sure our audience are aware. You can go to Rumble or YouTube, look for at Del Bacaro and Hook, and is spelled out A-N-D, Del Bacaro and Hook. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to share the video, because if you don't share the message, we can only go so far. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Thank you, Annie. And she's absolutely right. At Del Bacaro and Hook on Rumble and YouTube. You see my down here on the lower third at Right Hook 1776. That's my X handle, so you can find me there. And eventually, we're going to get a Facebook page up and running as this show really starts to take off. But as Annie so rightly pointed out, please subscribe. Please do that. And while you're at it, share, because getting the message out is what we're all about here on Del Bacaro and Hook. Now, listen, we take a short break. We come back. As I mentioned, we've got a fabulous show today. Noel Fitch. And you really need to follow Noel at nationalfile.com. We'll chat with him on the other side. You're watching and listening to Del Bacaro and Hook. We'll be back after these words. All right, welcome back to Del Bacaro and Hook, Enlightened Dissent. I am Steve Hook, and it's time we welcome our guest, and I'm thrilled to welcome the publisher of National File, Noel. Now, Noel, I want to get your last name right, so pronounce it for me.
So when I taught high school, they would say that it rhymed with something else, but we'll say that for the purpose of TV here, that it rhymes with rich or itch. Fritch is how it's pronounced.
Fritch. Noel Fritch. Okay, Noel, I think I know where you were going there. Anyway, Noel, it's great to see you, and we appreciate you coming on, and love the National File, love your piece, your work with National File, and it's an honor to have you on. Man, here we are. The country is it's just leaving skid marks as it circles the bowl, it seems. And here we are. We've got a disaster in the Middle East. We've got a disaster in Europe with Ukraine and Russia going back and forth. We've got a disaster in the south of our own nation with Florida, parts of Georgia, North Carolina, especially, even parts of South Carolina. And it's just going south. It's going in the wrong direction, but I'm starting to kind of get a sense that the worm might be turning with some of these independents and quote unquote moderate voters. I mean, let's just take a look at who some of the allies of the Trump team are. You've got Tulsi Gabbard, who has signed on. You've got RFK Jr., who is now signed on. These guys are, and by the way, they're both going around and campaigning with Trump. Boy, if that's not a slap in the face to the DNC, I don't know what is. And then, of course, you've got Elon Musk. And Elon made the trip to Butler, PA yesterday, and I've been to that Commonwealth many times. It's right next door. For one, it was ballsy as hell of Trump to go back there, I think. And I want you, before we get your take on all of this, I want you to see a clip. Elon was at that rally, and I know you've got some stuff that you want to weigh in on this, but let's listen to Elon talking about the importance of freedom of speech and the First and Second Amendments and all the rest. Here's Elon Musk from Butler, PA yesterday.
I think this election, I think it's the most important election of our lifetime. This is no ordinary election. The other side wants to take away your freedom of speech. They want to take away your right to bear arms. They want to take away your right to vote effectively. You got 14 states now that don't require voter ID. California, where I used to live, is just passed a law banning voter ID for voting. I still can't believe that's real. So how are you supposed to have a proper election if there's no ID? It's just meaningless. And free speech is the bedrock of democracy. And if people don't know what's going on, if they don't know the truth, how can you make an informed vote? You must have free speech in order to have democracy. That's why it's the First Amendment. And the Second Amendment is there to ensure that we have the First Amendment.
Yeah, very good point. But I thought Elon was great. I thought, he really fired the crowd up. He announced himself as Dark MAGA because he was wearing a black Make America Great Again hat. So as we touched on, Noel, you have Tulsi, you have RFK Jr., you have Elon Musk siding with Trump. But the good news for the Democrats is they've got Lynn Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and George Conway. So
Right.
I'd say if it were a game of shirts and skins and we were 13 years old, Team Trump would have the decided advantage here. What do you make of the speech? What do you make of Elon's support of Trump? What do you make of all of it?
Well, and thanks for having me, Steve.
Sure.
Appreciate it. Just Friday, I was with the Trump team here in Fayetteville. I'm on the west side of Fort Bragg, where all the officers live, and they play golf and everything. And we were down there, and there was a great town hall, and Matt Lohmeyer was on stage with President Trump, talking almost exclusively about fixing the military, which you and I both know is a major problem that we have here. And it creeps out into the rest of the communication space, the military involvement. And by the way, Tulsi spends a lot of time there at Bragg. I'll always call it Bragg. I will never call it Fort Liberty. And that's where the PSYOP Monkey division is based. The PSYOPs are run out of the same operation there at Bragg with the Special Forces. And sadly, what we're seeing writ large is what I call Q 3.0. In 2024, we have Q 3.0, and that is Trump inevitability. 2022 was Q 2.0, as I call it. That was big red wave. And of course, everything leading up to 2020 was Q 1.0, which was trust the plan. And so now we have this huge air of Trump inevitability, and we've got to be very careful, guys. It's a month left. You cannot assume that it is inevitable that Trump will win. I'm here in North Carolina, and we're going to be down those 2025 Western counties. We have 100 counties, and in those 2025 Western counties, that's the old Mark Meadows district. This is red meat Republican territory, with the exception of Buncombe County, which is Asheville. But it's everything over there is red because there's just so many Republican voters. In this state, we've been razor thin each of the last couple elections. And by the way, we've had Democrat governor. We have Cooper because Chris LaCivita was installed here to manage the loss for our former Republican governor, Pat McCrory. And he did that very well. Chris LaCivita managed the loss there and gave us our Democrat Cooper and Stein, and who they are now ruining this state and running the central response to this disaster that we have here. And we don't need to get into all of the conspiracy theories. One way or another, there's a bunch of water on the ground and a bunch of people are dying. The numbers are going to go to 2,500, 3,000 at least, I'm confident, which is unbelievably tragic. And you're going to see at least 100,000 fewer votes out there for this election, maybe 200,000 fewer votes out there in those couple, 2-3 Western districts. And that's all that, look, McCrory lost in 2016 out of 4.3 million votes cast in North Carolina. 10,000 votes separated the Republican and the Democrat. And so that's what we're looking at here in North Carolina. Same happened in 20 with Tom Tillis after we destroyed Cal Cunningham. National File destroyed Cal Cunningham. And Charlie Kirk gives National File credit for keeping the 50-50 Senate in 2020 because I'm not a fan of Tom Tillis, but Tom Tillis owes us his job. Okay, and that kept us the 50-50 Senate when we lost the White House and lost the House. Pelosi was running the House, sadly.
Yeah.
And so, look, you have to look at all of this militarily rather than just from a communications and debate standpoint, Steve, is what I would say. A lot of look, if you watch Fox News and if you watch Newsmax and you watch a lot of the establishment kind of conservative ink press, all they tell you is, well, I mean, we're killing them we are so right. We're right and they're wrong. And it's hypocrisy. And oh my gosh. Well, it woulda, shoulda, coulda. That's not
Yeah.
what a campaign is. A campaign is an organizing contest, and guess who organizes and guess who doesn't? Democrats organize, Republicans do not.
Well, Noel, to your point about Western North Carolina, that's the red belt of North Carolina, and it has been for a long, long time, with the exception of Asheville, which, by the way, is also pretty much underwater. But you mentioned how this could affect voting turnout. I don't think. Listen, they don't even have their convenience stores were washed away. I mean, these are communities that are largely gone. So they are going to have a hell of a time getting back up on their feet. Just living a normal life is going to be a difficult time. And then forget the going out and voting. David Axelrod on CNN came out and said the quiet part out loud. He said exactly, he just alluded to what you said. He said, look, I have no doubt that the rich upper echelon of people I mean, it's just such a snobby attitude, but the well-to-do Ashevilleans in North Carolina will find a way to vote because they're very passionate about this. But the lower income Western North Carolinians, well, they've got more pressing concerns. I'm paraphrasing, but basically, they won't do what it takes to vote, and this might be enough to swing the election. This is Axelrod almost hoping that there's no emergency, polling station set up. And you mentioned we don't want to jump into the conspiracy theories, but here's where the conspiracy theories start coming into play. When you've got David Axelrod saying that on TV, you start to wonder, well, gee, I wonder if maybe they're slowing their roll a little bit because they know an election is in 30 days. And not only that, but you've got Alejandro Mayorkas saying that FEMA is out of money. And then the White House, Jean-Pierre, comes out there and says, KJP comes out and says, don't believe the rumors. Hell, the rumor came from your own DHS secretary, for God's sakes. It's not a rumor, it's a fact. Why don't you talk about some of that?
Well, first of all, you pointed to it. FEMA operates under the aegis of DHS. That's Mayorkas, the same guy who's flooding our borders and driving up this housing crisis that we have here, bringing in 1 million illegals, every month or so, from all countries and all continents, is also in charge of the Great Replacement Theory, which of course is a fact, and it's another fact that Democrats want. Basically, Republicans dead and unable to feed themselves and unable to clothe themselves and house themselves and transport themselves. See, Axelrod knows something that maybe a lot of folks don't think about, and that is that in the mountains and in Appalachia, in West Virginia, in southwestern Virginia, the poor folks live down in the holler and the rich folks live up on a hill. And they know this. And so now it's vital that, of course, we get all kinds of relief materials, water, food, health stuff, diapers for babies, formula stuff in there for those folks. And they know that they need to essentially choke point the delivery. And that's what they're doing. That's exactly what they're doing. We have some sourcing inside of some of the biggest government entities here in North Carolina. Later today, up on nationalfile.com, there will be a link talking about Blue Cross Blue Shield demanding that their employees only go through the Red Cross and then this thing called a Volunteer NC, which is the North Carolina government. So they want to funnel all the money. They want to make sure they have control and access over all the money. This is what these people are, the ultimate gatekeepers. They're the ultimate trolls under the bridge. And who's that tip tapping on my bridge? They're going to take their money. They're going to take your money if you try to cross their bridge. That's who they are. They don't want people to get supplies.
Well, that is a sad state of affairs. but we've been hearing about a lot of anecdotal stories of people saying we drove down there. We brought a box truck full of supplies, and we were stopped by FEMA, and FEMA said we'll take it from here, boys, and they took the supplies. Now, whether that's all true or not, I don't know, but I
It
do know
is.
it
It
is.
is. I can
Okay.
confirm. I'm on the ground here, and I have multiple sources who live there, who are there. I'm in touch with the Mark Robinson campaign. Okay. Who has another scandal. That's a whole nother segment we can talk about another time, maybe, Steve.
Yeah.
But we have multiple sources on the ground, firsthand, who have bumped up against the red tape of the federal authorities, and they just go around them, and they've threatened to arrest. And I hope it doesn't come to, like, shooting down helicopters. I don't. We've heard that they're looking for the tail numbers of planes, and identifying numbers of helicopters. Who knows if they're going to come back later and maybe take their pilots' licenses. There's no telling what these hooligans. Well, it's a thug racket, Steve. That's what it is. The whole
Yeah.
thing's a thug racket, and you're in Jersey. You know how that goes.
I do. I know exactly. Believe me, I've dealt with Trenton for a long time now, so I do know exactly how that goes. It is a little bit odd though, because there is there is a disconnect here with the left. Out of one side of their mouth, they're saying this isn't just about equality. We need equity. So everybody needs to be the same, unless it comes to Asheville and the upper middle class residents who are a solid blue wall against the red wave that has now been literally washed away by waves. And so the equity in this instance means getting the folks that are going to vote Democrat the supplies they need and screw the rest. If I got that about right?
Yes, without question. It is about haves and have-nots. And look, I actually just firmly believe that North Carolina is probably not going to go for Trump at this point. This is a force majeure situation where I don't know that we can overcome this just by the math. And I will say this: my new slogan here is "Save North Carolina, Save America."
Yeah.
Save North Carolina, save America. If we do that, then maybe we have a chance here. But if Trump loses North Carolina, it's not looking good. They're like going back to the PSYOP that at the top of the segment. Look, it's an all organizing contest. You've got to make sure that the butts are out there in such force that they can't snake it, they can't scam it. The problem is, of course, in states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Arizona, you've got these machines that are involved with these elections, and they have closed source code, and you honestly can't count the stinking votes. You just have no idea at the end of the day what the vote looks like. And then they rely on the calendar. In a week, you got to certify the votes. Some states it's 10 days, 12 days, 14 days. South Carolina, it's like 3 days. You got to certify the votes. Now, South Carolina this time will go for Trump. Give it like a decade or so. South Carolina will be leaning blue, just like North Carolina is, thanks to guys like Chris LaCivita, who runs the Trump campaign.
Jeez Louise. That's amazing. So you really think that Chris LaCivita may be kind of a mole inside the
Yes.
campaign?
Yeah, he's a Goomba. Total Goomba. And I'm a quarter ITAL, so I can say that. I'm a WAP. I'm a Dago. So that's what he is.
Okay. Oh, it sounds like he comes from Trenton, or maybe Detroit, or maybe San Francisco.
My dad's from Detroit. There you go. You got it.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, this is all very odd, but I kind of wonder one thing, Noel, and see if you. Now, this is just me kind of thinking. I would assume that if you live in Asheville, North Carolina, regardless of party affiliation, you would be so livid about seeing the way this thing has been handled. There was zero pre-staging. FEMA was not on the ground in North Carolina. Hell, they weren't on the ground really anywhere. They did no pre-staging. And all of a sudden it came down to, oh my God, we better get there quick, but not really that quick. And by the way, slow down all private donations and private organizations and NCOs that may be trying to help out, NGOs that may be trying to help out Western North Carolina, slow them down, and we'll try and get this sorted. And meanwhile, the White House is reporting that all of this stuff that we're talking about is conjecture and rumor, and none of it can be proven. But we have anecdotal tale after anecdotal tale. Currently, the death toll stands at 232, with hundreds missing, upwards of perhaps even up to 1,000 or so missing. So that death count's going to go up. Is this the worst national disaster, the handling of a national disaster we've seen in the last 50 years? I think this trumps Katrina.
I think without question it trumps Katrina. I can't remember the exact Katrina number, but I think Katrina actually, the death toll there was much lower than people kind of conventionally remember. I'm thinking it was like 300 people or something like that. We're already there here, and they're going to be digging people out of cars and mud for weeks.
Yeah, and
Steve.
under debris and stuff.
It's horrendous. It's really bad. The water was up so unbelievably high. And again, you don't want to get into the conspiracy theories, but and again, look, I'm open to conspiracy fact. We know that the phrase conspiracy theory is, a creation by the CIA. So, used to discredit us, and only us. But there's a lot going on that's really weird about this whole thing. You got to look, here's a fact. A lot of this flooding happened because of the Democrat works, the WPA, the Work Project Administration, and FDR in the TVA. Okay, so this is at a very minimal level. We can point straight back to the Democrats and blame. What could go wrong when you dam up, 30 rivers over the span of a couple of 100 miles and turn it into 50 or so lakes. What could go wrong? Well, here it is. I think we're seeing it.
So basically what we're seeing here is we've got a president, a current sitting president, that is cognitively gone. He couldn't be bothered with it, doesn't even know what's going on. We saw the video of him coming off Air Force One the other day. He's like, what storm are you talking about, when he just left the storm area? Although to be fair, he only left South Carolina. He never went into the really bad ravaged towns in North Carolina. And then you've got a vice president who is seeking the highest office in the land, and she can't be bothered because she's campaigning. It really is. It's an utter disaster. We're going to keep on this, and we'll follow it up. And Noel Fritch, thanks. Listen, we've got to take a break. When we come back on the other side, Noel, I want to kind of do a 180, because as we mentioned what's going on in our own country, it's also important that we take note of what's going on overseas. I want to get your take on Israel, Iran, and what led to this catastrophic, what could turn into a regional, if not world war, on the other side, if we can jump into that. My guest today is Noel Fitch. He is with the National File, and we'll be right back and speak with Noel about Israel, Iran, and maybe we'll even throw in a little bit of Ukraine. You're listening to Del Beccaro and Hook. I'm Steve Hook. We'll be back right after this. All right, welcome back to Del Beccaro and Hook. Of course, our good buddy Tom Del Beccaro is on his honeymoon after a wonderful wedding last weekend, and so I'm just kind of filling in for both of us. I'm doing a double team here. Our guest today, Noel Fitch. He is the publisher of National File. Noel, thank you for hanging in. Okay, we've talked about what's happening in the United States. It's an utter disaster, an unmitigated disaster. One could say a planned disaster. Not maybe the disaster itself may not have been planned, but the way the relief has been carried out has been certainly people have been putting their thumb on the scale. So let's move across the big pond, if we shall, and look at Israel. Israel is I still don't think this gets enough coverage. Just the barbarity of October 7th. I make the case, Noel, that every single death on both sides of this conflict can be laid directly at the feet of Hamas, and to a greater extent, directly at the feet of the mullahs in Iran. The same mullahs that the Biden administration lifted sanctions for and basically said, yeah, sell your oil to whoever you want. Now they're rolling in dough. They're funding the Houthis in Yemen. They're funding Hezbollah in Lebanon. They're funding Hamas in parts of Israel, including Gaza, of course. Israel's done a hell of a job there. But what do you make of all of this, and where do you think we're headed? I heard Biden say the other day, when asked directly, what do you think about Israel taking out Iran's nuke sites? And Biden said, no, I don't think that should be a no-go zone or something. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically put a firm no on that, which seems absurd in the extreme. But what do you think about it all, Noel?
That issue is a kind of a crazy issue. Nobody wants to have a nuclear war. It'll be a thermonuclear war, and half the world will blow up. And so, if we start saber rattling to that level, we got problems. I think most Americans would probably agree with that. And I look, when it comes to, we were just talking about, how obviously Iran is playing heavily inside of internal Israeli politics, during the break. It's really important to remember that Israel's not monolithic. And so when you've got Likud party in charge right now for the time being of Israel, and predominantly worried about a lot of other things other than taking care of it, the Israelis, you have to question a lot of what's going on there. And Benny Gantz, the former opponent of Netanyahu, now runs the defense inside of Israel. That's a problem, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that Netanyahu is a good actor on the global stage. And I think it's worthwhile to take a look at the possibility that a lot of the pro wrestling that we see take place in the national media is intended specifically to make sure that some of the other objectives essentially just go unnoticed. And one of those objectives, I can tell you firsthand from sources that I have inside of the DoD and the intel community, is that basically this regime, the Likud party that's in charge of Israel, that, by the way, vaxxed all of the citizens to the hilt. Okay, they treat the Israeli citizens very, very badly. The Likud party does, Netanyahu does, and they're putting them in. They're frankly, dangling the Israeli citizens in front of some of these other crazy folks out there who want to go to war in order to achieve the next step objective, which is more military conflict. I think it's. A lot of folks will realize that, maybe some of the folks in Israel don't want to have peace. And who knows what the ultimate objectives are there. Now we're there in Lebanon. By the way, Lebanon gets this week $130 million, $127 million in aid. Okay, because of this stuff. So what I would say is we need to start looking at all of these conflagrations around the globe as money laundering operations rather than as taking them at face value and say, oh, this is exactly what's happening on its face. No, almost never is what we hear in the press exactly what is going on. Yeah. It's almost never the case. Something else is going on. And a lot of times it has to do with laundering of money, laundering of drugs, and laundering and trafficking of humans as well. And we see that here in our country when we have millions of people flooding into our country. And by the way, where are they coming from? War-torn countries in the Middle East who are now sending us their refugees while we are in the middle of a crisis. So you have to start to look at all of these things holistically. Everything fits together. Nothing happens in a vacuum, Steve. And if we are ever going to fix any of this, we have to start looking at these problems from this perspective.
And it's a perspective that's hard to see because it's intentionally kept hidden. It was Eisenhower years ago that warned America of the military industrial complex. Kennedy took on that too. And of course, we know what happened to Kennedy. And when I look at all of this, and again, none of this happens in a vacuum, but when I look at all of this through the long lens of history, Eisenhower warned of the military-industrial complex as he was exiting office. Kennedy talked about it while he was very much in office, running for re-election, had won the re-election, Shortly thereafter, on a trip to Dallas, we all know what happened to him. Now you've got Trump out there basically saying the same thing. We need to clean house from the bottom to the top, and soup to nuts. We need to clean out the deep state, as it were. Boy, that's not going to be easy, because you have deep state not just in the United States, you have deep state in our allies too. Whether it's the UK, whether it's Israel, whether it's hello Ukraine. And you're right, they're getting a whole hell of bucket loads of money for us. You just mentioned over $100 million going to Lebanon. So far, the federal government has spent roughly $35 million in America for this storm, for Helene. So, and then Blinken comes out the day before yesterday and says, we're sending all of this money because we have people unhoused in Beirut. Unhoused, what a stupid word. But this is what they do. I mean,
I've got to make Lebanon great again hat. Actually, I'm going to go deliver it to Kamala Harris at her next campaign rally. Look, in general, we want to avoid war. War is destruction, right? Nobody wants, kids and look, I'm glad Hassan Nasrallah is gone, or these people are holding people hostages, using kids as human shields and everything. Horrible stuff. War is horrible. It is horrible, and we need to do everything we can to avoid it. And so, look, the timing of this stuff has to be looked at as well as suspect. They always do this. They essentially legislate by crisis and elect by crisis. Everybody will remember 2008. John McCain had to throw the old brakes on the Maverick Express in the middle of the financial downturn. Okay. The financial crisis of 2008. And he famously paused his campaign for 2 weeks. For what reason? Let's go back to the money laundering again. Oh yes, that's right. Like $2 or $3 trillion in TARP spending that Barack Obama, by the way, very much wanted. Thanks, John McCain. Hope he's burning comfortably in hell right now. This is how this works. Everything is a shakedown. Everything is ante up, ante up, ante up. Okay. And now the chips are down. And now it's like, hey, what are you going to do about it? They have a gun to your head. Nice country you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. Yeah. And here we are. So we've just got to tell these guys they need to pound sand. They can F off with all their crises. They can F off with all of their shenanigans. It's racketeering. It is. All of this is international racketeering. And they're just doing it so they can do what? Raid our treasury for trillions more.
Yeah. So while war may be hell, war is also profitable. And that's the dirty little not so secret. Let me ask you this, Noel. Would you agree that the world would be a safer place had we initially backed the Green Revolution in Tehran? Had we backed the will of the Iranian people? Because, hell, our producer is an Iranian American, and I can tell you what her thoughts on the mullahs are. It's not good, that's for sure. So Netanyahu's grabbing onto that, and I think Netanyahu does see them, and probably rightly so, as an existential threat to not only Israel, but to the whole region. I would say probably behind the scenes, there's some backdoor talks with the House of Saud in Saudi Arabia, probably some of the sheiks in Kuwait and the UAE are probably UEA are probably saying, hey, the United Arab Emirates, all of these countries are probably making back channel talks to Netanyahu saying, look, we're not going to stop you and we're going to green light it, but we can't publicly state that. You think I've got that about right?
Absolutely. And so now you're talking about kind of more of the hidden hand stuff that happens here. I call it Pallywood. That's what I call it, Steve. It's Palestine, Pallywood. And Israel's in on it. And to a large extent, they're actually helping to orchestrate a lot of this. The idea, it's funny, they're very publicly softening this relationship between Israel and Saudi Arabia. I thought Saudi Arabia was almost all Americans. Of course, if you ask them, what do the Saudis think of Israel? They'd say, oh, they hate them. Those Muslims hate the Israelis. That's not the truth. They work very closely, hand in glove, with the Israelis. So the Saudis do. Yeah. And just note, you have Jared Kushner doing the big diplomatic deal, right? And then what happens next? The Saudis give him $2 billion to manage in a hedge fund when he's never run a hedge fund before. Okay, back to the money laundering. Okay, you see how this works. It doesn't work as it seems on the surface. And number one, anytime the mainstream media is saying this is the truth, literally every viewer's first response needs to be, okay, I now know that everything they say is almost literally 180 degrees wrong, exactly wrong. Not just like a little bit wrong, but like exactly wrong,
Yeah.
totally wrong. And something else is going on here that is probably the truth that is in the other direction. And so, look, people are people, humans are humans. The Israelis need to not be abused by the regime that is in charge of that state. The Iranians need to not be abused by the regime that is in charge of that state. That's where this might sound totally crazy. Believe it or not, despite the illusion of control that all of these totalitarian leaning, democratically elected leaders of these countries might have us believe that they are. We are moving in a direction broadly internationally toward more peaceful, more prosperous, more less contentious international relations. I know that might sound crazy, but you have to, again, remember the mainstream media runs with this politics of division all day, every day. You have to hate this person. Black has to hate white. Israel has to hate Iran and Hezbollah and Gaza and Saudis and, like you said, the Emiratis and the UAE. They're the only ones in that whole region. So that mere rhetorical strategy of saying there's only one group of good people inside of the Middle East and everyone else is bad, that's like, it's a guaranteed hook to always have this conflict built in. Think about that. Yeah. And so this goes back to the conversation about how the psyops work. Okay, what are we being programmed to think and believe? That is what is called a heuristic. That is a habit of mind. And it's there. So you guys go back 30 years. So damn insane. I remember very vividly, when Kuwait, had a little bit of oil stolen from them. The thing with Saddam Hussein was very much trumped up. Okay, who did the Kuwait thing? I think there's a good question. We could go back into how that happened. How is it that the George Bush administration ends up taking us to this bogus war, and now all of a sudden all of America hates all of the Muslims? Okay, and now then fast forward 10 years, and it's 2001 and 9/11, and we have, yes, there's some planes that flew into some buildings, and yeah, that's horrible. It's about as many people died there as are going to end up dying in our floods here. But you end up with what? You end up with Toby Keith, God rest his soul, singing, "We'll put a boot in your ass. It's the American way." You have to start viewing it from this perspective and see how you're being manipulated so that you can get yourself out of those heuristics and habits of mind so that you don't wake up hating humanity every day.
Yeah, that's not easy. I do wonder if you see anything optimistic about what's going on. The one thing, if people ask me all the time, well, Steve, you seem so worried about where we're going. Do you see anything good? And my answer is always, well, anecdotally, I think more and more people are waking up to this. The New York Times does not have the influence they once had. They certainly do within the media bubble, but not within the greater scheme of things. People are starting to question everything. CNN, of all networks, is starting to kind of err a little bit more on the side of, dare I say, fairness towards Trump, which, I mean, they're still unbelievably unfair and skewed, but by relative recent standards, they're kind of pulling back a little bit. Do you think that the people are starting to wake up to the manipulation that's being carried out on such a large scale?
I do. And you had it during COVID, and that was really one of the big wake ups. And then folks, you had the popularization of the term, the mass formation psychosis. And people see that. They see that, almost half of Americans, sadly, fully believe that Trump is Hitler and fully believe that, just shut up and take the jab. But I think those numbers are dwindling, right? They're certainly falling off. with every young student athlete that dies and freaking falls dead in the field of play, unbelievably tragically. And sadly, yes, people are going to have to get hurt for that process to happen, Steve, because you're gonna get injured, you're gonna get damaged if you roll with the racketeering deep state. By the way, John Bolton says there's no such thing as the deep state, but if you go along with them, they'll prove that they will hurt you and those that you love.
Yeah.
And Kamala was doing an interview over here. They were filling up bags of goodies to go to the people who are hurt. She was there for a press op the other day with a gal here in North Carolina from maybe Greensboro or Charlotte or something. An urban gal. And the gal was trying her best to be nice and respectful to Kamala while basically telling Kamala, hey, y'all hadn't done ish for us.
Yeah.
And she had her street lingo way of saying that. And, but that's basically what she said. She's, our girls don't have, their feminine products. Their babies don't have diapers. Their single moms don't have food. And she was trying as nice as she could to explain that to her. This is a black woman who almost definitely has never thought about voting for a Republican on camera, telling Kamala, y'all suck at what y'all do.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, people are waking up. And
meanwhile, Kamala, whatever, is sitting there going, look, lady, I'm just trying to do a photo op here. Would you leave me the hell alone?
Yes. Yeah. It's on Twitter. Our reporter, Frankie Stocks, has it on his Twitter. And it's hard to listen to the gal talk and everything, but that's what's happening unmistakably. And it's just, and you say a lot of the stuff's anecdotal here in North Carolina. Look, National File is going to be on this. We've got some good reporters that are on the ground. You got Margot in WNC. She's a great resource on Twitter. You've got Alan Mashburn, Mashburn4NC on Twitter. There's some of these accounts who are getting the real deal. And then again, we're gonna have some stories up here today about the Red Cross and Blue Cross Blue Shield forcing their employees. I mean, there's probably a lawsuit in there somewhere against BCBS. Not that I want anybody's healthcare to cost more expensive because
sure
because there's litigation, but it's bad here. I'll go back to it. Save North Carolina, save America.
There you go. Noel Fitch, listen, man, we really appreciate you coming on today. Some pretty heady stuff, but we'll stay on top of it. We'd love to have you back. National File, it's nationalfile.com, correct?
That's it.
There
yes, sir.
You go, nationalfile.com. Noel is also on X, but has been quiet. We'll talk about that in another time, but you've been a little bit silent on X, but there's a reason for that. But you're certainly not silent on National File, and you're certainly not silent here on Del Bacar and Hook. I thank you for joining us today. We look forward to having you back, and best of luck. Godspeed to everybody in your state of North Carolina there, man. We really do hope that they get the help that they so desperately need. Noel, thank you, brother.
Thank you all for having me.
Okay. There he goes. That's Noel Fitch. Again, nationalfile.com. You're listening and watching Del Macaro and Hook. Until next week, goodbye.